Welcome to Tracy's Terrors. If you love horror and appreciate smart animal commentary, then you're in the right place. Today, Strigoi, VamPullet, and I will be discussing W. Scott Poole's 2016 biography, In the Mountains of Madness, The Life and Extraordinary Afterlife of H.P. Lovecraft. H.P. Lovecraft and I have something in common. We are both from Rhode Island. And while he hails from Providence and I come from a rural backwater, when you live in a state that is a 30-minute drive from end to end, everyone is your neighbor. And since my neighbor was a master of the weird tale and a horror icon, you would think that I, lover of all things grim and ghastly, would be, expert level when it comes to his oeuvre. But the fact is that I'm just getting acquainted with Lovecraft. For decades, I avoided his work because, as I've mentioned before, I'm not a real science fiction fan. Also, I had seen, many images of Cthulhu on telephone poles and t-shirts and tattoos, and I found the tentacled monster more ridiculous than scary. I think perhaps most of all, one of the reasons I stayed away from Lovecraft's work was I was intimidated by just the sheer intensity of his fandom. What finally prompted me to take up Lovecraft was Stephen King's Danse Macabre. In his friendly and accessible way, King convinced me that a knowledge of Lovecraft would only enrich my appreciation for horror in general. And he was right, it has. Also, Lovecraft has satisfied an aesthetic desire that I didn't even know I had. When I read horror, I want an evocative thicket of adjectives and not an austere Hemingway-esque sentence. But now that I've read some of Lovecraft's essential works, In the Mountains of Madness, The Call of Cthulhu, The Shadow over Innsmouth, The Color Out of Space, and so on, I want to know more about the man who created them and the context in which they were produced. And I found the perfect resource in W. Scott Poole's 2016 In the Mountains of Madness, The Life and Extraordinary Afterlife of H.P. Lovecraft. Yes, this book was published 10 years ago, but it still feels right up to date. And of course, I only read things when they're 10 years out of date. While this biography would be a rewarding read for the most hardcore Lovecraft fan, it is especially suited for readers like me, which is to say those who do not yet have a Cthulhu tattoo. There are so many things to recommend this book to the Lovecraft novice. First, Poole tells you what you've missed. He sketches the history of Lovecraft biography and scholarship, introducing all of the major players from, and I'm going to massacre these names, August Derleth, who invented and perpetuated a rather limited image of Lovecraft, to S.T. Joshi, the undisputed author on Lovecraft today, who really professionalized the field of study. After introducing key figures and outlining the conversation around Lovecraft, he makes several critical interventions that might interest a newer and more diverse readership. My favorite is his reevaluation of women in Lovecraft's life. Poole makes the case very persuasively that without his mother's indulgent parenting style, his grandmother's study of astronomy, and his aunt's chemistry books, Lovecraft's peculiar thematic obsessions would never have coalesced. Pursuing interests that were typically associated with men, these women gave Lovecraft the tools that he needed to combine science and technology and the occult in his own signature style. Even more than that, what's really interesting about the book is that Poole locates Lovecraft at the root of modern-day nerd culture. He explores his connection to the structure of internet forums, the dynamism of role-playing games. He connects back to Lovecraft. And he really looks at the transformation of eccentricity, the characteristic of eccentricity, into a positive trait in white middle-class culture. Perhaps Poole's most significant contribution to Lovecraft scholarship is his discussion of race. As he says, to say that Lovecraft was simply a product of his time in his espousal of racist and anti-Semitic views is inadequate because there were alternative viewpoints readily available to him. Indeed, progressive ideas were often, as Poole shows, articulated by Lovecraft's core group of friends. So his hatred was a conscious choice, and it leaves a complicated legacy for the many writers of color who work in the genre. Poole considers how the horror sci-fi community has attempted to acknowledge Lovecraft's racism without completely rejecting him and jettisoning his beloved creations. Poole believes, and I agree, that one of the best ways to engage with Lovecraft's vexed history is to confront his work. Poole wants you to put aside the endlessly proliferating commodities that have turned Lovecraft into a brand. And here he's talking about the coffee mugs and dog toys, t-shirts and bumper stickers, all of these signs signaling white hipsterism. Put those aside and actually read the tales. To make this prospect less daunting, and with so much to choose from, it can be challenging to find an appropriate entry point. Poole has grouped the stories into categories, curating collections for what he calls neophytes. Second level is adepts, and experts are cultists. He's put them in these categories, and his suggestions have really helped me chart a course into the eldritch wilderness of Lovecraft's work. I'm grateful for the guidance. If you are a neophyte like me, this biography will initiate you into the unspeakable mysteries of Lovecraftian arcana. And if you are already a cultist, it will give you a fresh perspective on familiar nightmares. If you've enjoyed this episode and you would like to hear more from the three of us, please subscribe to the channel. It would mean a lot to us. Thank you for joining us here today, and we'll see you next time. Take care.